We have been taught to admire fast decision-makers. Business school celebrates the executive who chooses in real time. Silicon Valley mythologizes the founder who decides in seconds. The market rewards what looks like decisiveness. Move fast, break things. Quick decisions win. But this is where almost everyone gets it wrong. The best performers in every field are not the fastest decision-makers. They are something else entirely. They are the people who seem to move slowly when they choose, yet somehow complete things faster than everyone else. They reach the finish line while others are still debating the path. You have noticed this, even if you have not named it. A colleague takes time before committing to a project, but once they start, they move like someone possessed. They do not second-guess. They do not spiral. They do not go backward. Meanwhile, you decided quickly, started faster, but then spent weeks fixing mistakes and reworking pieces that were wrong. Who actually won? The slow decider did. Not because they are smarter, not because they are more naturally gifted, but because they understood something about how decisions actually work in the real world. And almost nobody sees this. Here is what most people miss. Deciding and executing are not the same speed. A fast decision does not create a fast execution. In fact, the opposite is often true. A decision made in haste creates execution that is slow, uncertain, and full of friction. A decision made with care creates execution that is nearly frictionless. This is the pattern successful people see. This is what they build their entire approach around. Think about the last time you made a hasty decision. You chose quickly. You felt good about deciding. But then what happened? You started executing and immediately hit problems you had not anticipated. You had to call a meeting to clarify something you should have understood beforehand. You realized halfway through that your choice did not align with something else you were already committed to. You had to backtrack, rethink, course correct. Now think about a decision you took time with. You sat with it, you asked questions, you considered angles other people had not mentioned. You felt almost too slow, but when you finally committed, something shifted. The execution was clean. People understood what you wanted. There was no confusion about the next steps. You moved forward without friction. The difference is not your decision speed. The difference is decision quality and the execution friction it prevents. Most people believe the competition happens in the choosing moment. That is where speed matters most. Get to the answer first. Decide before your competitors do. But this is a misreading of where the real game happens. The real game happens in execution. The winner is not the person who decided first. The winner is the person who executed fastest. And execution speed is almost entirely determined by one thing: how clear and strong your decision was before you started moving. A weak decision, one made without full thinking, creates a chaotic execution. People are confused. You second-guess yourself. You discover problems that should have been obvious. You have to redo work. You move backward as often as forward. A strong decision, one that emerged from genuine thinking, creates a clean execution. Everyone understands the path. You spot the right moves quickly. People trust your direction because it is clear. You move only forward. This is the invisible advantage. This is why successful people can choose slowly and still win faster than everyone else. The confusion runs deep, though. We have built entire cultures around decisiveness as a virtue. We admire people who decide fast. We teach our teams to not overthink. We celebrate moving before you are ready. The startup that moves fastest wins. The leader who does not hesitate is strong. The person who takes time to decide is weak, indecisive, overthinking. But you have also seen where this leads. The organization that moves fast makes a decision at scale and then has to spend months recovering from the consequences. The leader who prides themselves on speed makes a call that sends the team in the wrong direction for weeks. The person who does not hesitate commits to something that contradicts something else they are already doing. Speed without clarity is not an advantage. It is a disadvantage wearing a very convincing mask. Successful people know this. They have learned, often through painful experience, that the real bottleneck is not how fast they can decide. The real bottleneck is how much friction their decision creates downstream. And friction is almost entirely preventable if you invest time up front. This is the shift. This is what separates the people who seem to move slower but win faster from everyone else. They are not smarter or faster thinkers. They simply understand where the real game is played. They know that choosing time and winning time are not the same thing. The question you should be asking is not, how fast can I decide? The question is, how clear can I become before I commit? And those are very different pursuits that demand very different skills. In the next section, we will look at what this clarity actually costs most people and why they keep making the same mistake. There is a cost to rushing a decision. Everyone pays it, but most people do not see it as the cost of rushing. They see it as normal. They see it as just how things work. The cost is execution friction. When you decide without full clarity, you create problems downstream that you have to solve in real time. These problems do not announce themselves as the cost of rushing your decision. They announce themselves as obstacles, unexpected complications, conversations you did not plan to have, work you did not expect to do. A marketing director decides quickly on a campaign approach without fully thinking through how it aligns with the company's positioning. 3 weeks into execution, the team realizes the campaign is sending mixed messages. Now there are urgent meetings, revisions. The timeline slips. What should have been a 2-month project becomes a 3-month project. The cost is hidden. The director thinks the project took longer than expected, but the truth is simpler. The rush to decide created the delay in execution. This happens everywhere, in career decisions, in business strategy, in relationships and major life choices. The rush to commit creates friction that reveals itself later as complications or setbacks or bad timing. But it is not bad timing. It is the predictable consequence of unclear choosing. Here is why this matters. Most people are not aware they are paying this cost. They experience the friction and never trace it back to the original decision. So they make the same mistake again and again. They rush the next decision and get surprised by the next set of complications. But there is something else happening underneath this. There is a psychological force driving the rush in the first place. Most people feel anxious when facing an important decision. The ambiguity bothers them. The uncertainty makes them uncomfortable. So they rush toward a choice, any choice, just to resolve the anxiety. The anxiety is the problem, and choosing quickly feels like the solution. Once they decide, the anxiety goes away. They feel relief. They feel decisive. They feel like they are moving. But what they have done is traded short-term anxiety relief for long-term execution friction. They solved the wrong problem. The problem was not the decision. The problem was their discomfort with the ambiguity that precedes a good decision. Successful people have learned to tolerate this ambiguity longer, not because they are more patient by nature, but because they have realized that the anxiety you feel before a decision is not a sign you should decide faster. It is actually information. It is telling you that you do not yet have full clarity, and if you rush through it, you will pay for it later. This is counterintuitive because everything in our culture tells us the opposite. We are taught that good leaders do not second-guess. Overthinking is the enemy. Analysis paralysis is the killer. Move fast, decide, and commit. But there is a huge difference between overthinking and thinking deeply. Overthinking is circular. You keep re-examining the same angles and reaching the same conclusions. You are not gaining new information. You are not becoming clearer. You are just looping. That is paralysis. Thinking deeply is different. You are asking questions you have not asked before. You are examining angles you have not considered. You are becoming clearer with each thought cycle. You are not going in circles. You are spiraling upward toward genuine understanding. Successful people know the difference. They know when they are overthinking and they stop, but they also know when they are thinking deeply and they continue. Most people cannot tell the difference, so they assume all slow thinking is overthinking and rush to decide. Here is a concrete example of how this plays out. A professional gets offered a new job, impressive title, good money. On the surface, it is clearly the right move, but something feels off. They cannot quite name it, so they are tempted to just decide and move on. I am overthinking this, they tell themselves. They accept the job. 6 months later, they realize the company culture does not match what they were told in interviews. The role is different from what was described. The person they would report to has a management style that conflicts with how they like to work. All of this information was available before they decided, but they did not uncover it because they did not sit with their initial hesitation long enough to ask, what specifically feels off here? If they had taken time, not to overthink, but to think deeply, they would have asked better questions, they would have talked to more people, they would have looked deeper at what the role really was, and they likely would have either uncovered solutions to the concerns or made an informed decision to pass. Instead, they rushed to resolve their anxiety, and they paid for it with months of misalignment and difficulty. The hidden cost of rushing decisions is this. You do not just create friction in execution, you also create friction in your own sense of clarity and direction. You commit to something without fully understanding what you are committing to. Then, when the reality of the decision meets the world, you are confused. You have to rethink. You have to adjust. You have to recover from the gap between what you thought and what is actually true. Successful people minimize this gap. They do it by investing time up front to understand what is actually true before they commit. This is what most people never see. The cost of rushing is not just lost time in execution. The cost is also lost certainty in knowing you made the right choice. When you decide with full clarity, you do not second-guess yourself. You do not spiral through doubt. You do not waste energy wondering if you chose wrong. You know. And that certainty is fuel. Most people are paying both costs and calling it normal. They rush decisions, pay for it in execution friction, and also live with lingering doubt about whether they chose well. They think this is just how decisions work. But it is not. It is what happens when you try to solve decision anxiety by deciding faster instead of deciding better. The people who seem to move slower but win faster have figured this out. They have learned to sit with the anxiety, to ask the questions, to become genuinely clear, and then they move without hesitation because they know. In the next section, we will look at exactly where successful people invest this slow time, and why those particular decisions matter so much more than others. Not all decisions deserve the same time investment. This is where most people go wrong. They either rush every decision or overthink every decision. They have not learned to distinguish between the decisions that matter and the decisions that do not. Successful people have learned this distinction. It is one of the most powerful filters they use. There are decisions that ripple, and there are decisions that do not. A ripple decision is one that shapes everything downstream. It affects what you do next, what you can do after that, who you work with, what your options are 6 months from now. Ripple decisions are foundational. They create the conditions for everything else. A non-ripple decision is one that you can adjust or reverse without major consequences. You decide how to structure a project plan, and if it turns out to be the wrong structure, you shift it. You choose a vendor, and if they do not work out, you switch. You pick a communication approach for a meeting, and if it does not land, you adjust it next time. Most people treat all decisions the same way. They either rush through everything or agonize over everything. But successful people have developed a sophisticated filter. They ask, is this a ripple decision or a non-ripple decision? If it is a non-ripple decision, one you can easily reverse or adjust, they decide quickly and move on. Why invest time? You can course correct. There is no real cost to a fast choice. So they choose and go. If it is a ripple decision, one that shapes what comes next, they slow down. They invest time. They ask deeper questions. They want genuine clarity before they commit because they know that clarity now prevents friction later. This is the pattern. This is where successful people put their slow time. Think about the decisions in your own life. Most of them are non-ripple. Which coffee shop to work from today, how to structure an email, which meeting to attend first, whether to take a different route home. These do not shape your life. You can adjust them. Successful people decide these quickly and without much thought. But then there are the ripple decisions. Who to hire for a key role, whether to leave your job, how to position your expertise in the market, whether to move to a new city, what the core strategy of your business is, how to structure a major relationship. These decisions shape what becomes possible and what becomes constrained. Successful people slow down here, not because they are overthinking, but because they understand what is actually at stake. Here is a concrete pattern. Ripple decisions usually involve two things. First, they are hard to reverse. Once you commit, unwinding that commitment is costly. Second, they affect multiple other decisions downstream. Once you choose this, it shapes what you can choose next. A hiring decision is ripple. Once you hire someone, reversing that decision is expensive and difficult. And that person's presence shapes your team dynamics, your culture, what kinds of future hires make sense, what projects you can take on. It ripples everywhere. A communication strategy decision is often non-ripple. If you decide to emphasize one angle in how you talk about your work and it does not resonate, you can adjust it next week. There is no major downside cost, so decide quickly. A career direction decision is ripple. Once you move in one direction, say toward management instead of individual contribution, you have foreclosed other options, at least for a while. You have shaped your resume, your experience, what people expect from you next. It is hard to reverse without cost. Successful people have internalized this pattern so deeply that they do it without conscious thought. They just sense which decisions matter and which do not. They speed up and slow down accordingly. But here is where it gets more subtle. The same decision can be ripple in one context and non-ripple in another. A project methodology choice might seem non-ripple. Just pick an approach, and if it does not work, adjust. But if you are choosing it for a new product that will define your company's reputation and customer relationships, suddenly it becomes ripple. Because how you build this product will determine what your customers expect from you, what they think you are capable of, what future products they will want from you. Context changes whether something ripples or not. Successful people have learned to read the context. They ask, what would reversing this decision actually cost? What else does this decision unlock or foreclose? Most people do not ask these questions. They decide based on comfort level or how much time they have available. They decide quickly because they are busy. They overthink because they are anxious. Neither approach is calibrated to what the decision actually requires. This is the shift. This is where the real advantage lives. When you learn to distinguish ripple from non-ripple, you free yourself up. You can move fast on small decisions without guilt. You give yourself permission to move slowly on big decisions without pressure. You are no longer operating on a single speed. You are operating on calibrated speed, and calibrated speed is faster overall, because you are not wasting time on small decisions and you are not creating friction on big ones. Successful people have learned this. They look at a decision and they immediately sense, is this ripple? If yes, they invest time. If no, they move on. This is not conscious deliberation. This is instinct built on repeated experience. Most people do not have this instinct yet. They are still treating all decisions as if they matter equally. They are still creating friction on decisions that do not need it and rushing decisions that demand time. But you can develop this filter. And once you do, everything changes, not just how fast you move, but how clean your execution becomes, because you're only creating friction on the decisions that genuinely matter. In the next section, we move deeper. We look at why your brain actually struggles with this distinction and what is really driving the anxiety underneath indecision. Why does your brain push you to decide fast when you know that fast decisions create friction? The answer is not that you are impatient. The answer is not that you lack discipline. The answer is that your brain has been wired by evolution to resolve uncertainty quickly. And that wiring serves you well most of the time. But in the modern world of complex decisions, it works against you. Here is what is actually happening. When you face an important decision, your brain enters a state of discomfort. The ambiguity is unpleasant. The uncertainty makes your nervous system slightly activated. You cannot rest until the decision is made. This is the anxiety trap. Your brain interprets this discomfort as a problem that needs solving, and the fastest way to solve it is to choose. Any choice. Make a decision, and the discomfort goes away. The anxiety resolves. You feel relief. Your nervous system settles. This feels like progress, but this is not progress. This is your brain's ancient survival mechanism trying to protect you in a context where it actually harms you. Evolution wired us to make decisions quickly when we faced immediate threats. A predator appears. You do not sit with the ambiguity. You decide, fight or flee. Now, the ability to decide fast in high-stakes, immediate situations is literally what kept your ancestors alive. But in the modern world, most of your important decisions are not immediate threats. A career move is not a predator. A business strategy decision is not a charging animal. These decisions benefit from slower thinking. But your brain does not know the difference. It just knows. Ambiguity is uncomfortable, so resolve it. This is why the anxiety around decision-making is so persistent. It is not something you can willpower away. It is built into your neurology. You cannot force yourself to become comfortable with ambiguity just by deciding to be. Your nervous system is going to activate. The discomfort is going to arise. But here is what successful people have learned. The discomfort is not a reason to decide faster. The discomfort is information. It is your brain telling you that something matters, and that is exactly when you should slow down. Most people read the discomfort as pressure to decide, but the signal and the solution are not the same thing. The signal is correct. Something matters. But the solution is not to rush. The solution is to think deeper. There is another layer to this anxiety trap that most people do not see. It is related to something psychologists call premature certainty. Here is how it works. When you make a decision, you immediately start gathering evidence that you chose correctly. Your brain wants to be right. It wants to believe the choice was good, so it starts noticing all the reasons your decision was right and filtering out evidence that it was wrong. This happens very fast. Within minutes of deciding, you have already begun the process of convincing yourself it was the right call. This feels good. It feels like conviction. It feels like confidence. But it is not conviction or confidence. It is your brain trying to resolve the discomfort of uncertainty by deciding to be certain about something you have not actually thought through. This is why people who decide quickly often feel so sure about their choices. They are not sure because they have thought deeply. They are sure because their brain has already started the work of justifying the decision they just made. Successful people are aware of this trap. They recognize that the feeling of certainty right after deciding is not the same thing as actual clarity about what you chose. So they do something counterintuitive. They sit with the choice for a while before fully committing to it. This creates what you might call a certainty lag. You make a tentative decision, but you do not immediately close the loop. You let it sit. You notice what comes up. You ask more questions. You check your intuition against reality. Only after this period of testing do you fully commit. This is not overthinking. This is the discipline of separating the decision from the justification of the decision. In the next section, we will look at how genuine clarity actually emerges and why it requires a completely different approach than most people think. Most people do not actually know what thinking is. They confuse thinking with worrying. They confuse deliberation with rumination. So when they try to think through a decision, what they are actually doing is looping through anxiety. This is why so many people believe that overthinking is their problem. They sit with a decision and feel uncomfortable. Their mind circles. They worry about different outcomes. They imagine problems, and they call this thinking. Then they feel exhausted and convinced that thinking is the enemy, so they rush the next decision to avoid the exhaustion. But genuine thinking is not exhausting. Genuine thinking is clarifying. Here is the difference. When you are overthinking, your mind is looping. You keep returning to the same angles and reaching the same conclusions. You are not gaining new understanding. You are generating anxiety. This is exhausting because you are not actually moving anywhere. When you are thinking deeply, your mind is expanding. Each question leads to new territory. You are learning something you did not know before. You are seeing angles you had not considered. You are becoming clearer with each thought cycle. This is energizing because you are actually moving forward. The key distinction is this. Real thinking generates new information. Overthinking recycles existing information. If you are thinking about a job offer and you keep asking the same questions, is this good for my career? Will I make enough money? Is the commute acceptable? And you keep reaching the same conclusions, that is overthinking. You are not learning anything new. You are just cycling through anxiety. But if you are asking questions like, what specifically felt off when I talked to people at this company? What would I need to be true about the role for this to be the right move? How does this opportunity compare to the other directions I could go? What am I actually optimizing for right now in my career? You are thinking deeply. You are generating new understanding with each question. Successful people have learned to ask the questions that expand their thinking, and they have learned to recognize when they are cycling and stop. Here is a concrete example. A business owner is considering whether to hire their first full-time employee. On the surface, the decision is straightforward. They need help. They can afford it. But something does not feel quite right. Most people would either rush through this anxiety, hire quickly just to resolve the discomfort, or overthink it. Spend weeks worrying about whether hiring is the right move without actually getting clearer. But a successful owner does something different. They ask expanding questions. What specifically would this person do that I cannot do myself? What would change about how I work if I had to delegate? What kind of person would I actually want to work with every day? What would I need to be true about my business before hiring made sense? With each question, they learn something new. They are not just spinning. They are actually becoming clearer about what they need and whether this decision aligns with their situation. And through this process, genuine clarity emerges. Clarity does not come from thinking faster. Clarity comes from asking better questions. This is what most people miss. They think clarity is something you reach by deciding, but clarity is something you build by thinking differently. Here is the actual process of how genuine clarity emerges. First, you name the uncertainty, not vaguely, but specifically. I am uncertain about whether this person is actually right for the role is clearer than I am uncertain about hiring. Second, you ask what information would make you certain. What would I need to know about their communication style? What would I need to understand about how they handle pressure? Now you have specific things to investigate. Third, you go investigate. You talk to people who have worked with them. You give them a small project and see how they approach it. You notice how they respond to feedback. You gather real information instead of imagining it. Fourth, you let the information settle. You do not immediately interpret it through the lens of justifying a quick decision. You sit with it. You notice what your intuition tells you. You check whether the information you gathered actually resolves your uncertainty or whether it surfaces new questions. Only then, when you have real information and your intuition aligns with it, do you have genuine clarity. And when you have this kind of clarity, your execution is clean. You do not second-guess yourself. You do not discover problems mid-execution that you should have seen beforehand. You move without friction. This is the pattern. This is how clarity actually forms. But it requires patience. It requires the discipline to ask questions instead of rush to answers. It requires trusting that the discomfort you feel during this process is not a reason to stop. It is part of the process. Most people do not trust this. They feel the discomfort, and they believe it is telling them to decide faster. But that is misreading the signal. The signal is real. Something matters. But the interpretation is wrong. The discomfort is not telling you to rush. It is telling you that you are in the territory where genuine thinking is required. And genuine thinking always feels slower at first because you are not following the familiar grooves of your mind. You are creating new pathways. Successful people have learned to recognize this territory. They know when they have entered the space where clarity is being built, and they do not fight it. They lean into it. In the next section, we will look at what actually makes a decision strong versus just fast. There is a difference between a decision that feels right and a decision that actually is right. Most people cannot tell the difference, so they confuse the two. A decision that feels right is the one you just made. Your brain has already started the work of justifying it. Your nervous system has relaxed because the uncertainty is resolved. You feel a sense of relief and rightness. But a decision that actually is right is one that holds up over time. When you start executing it, it does not reveal hidden problems. When you encounter obstacles, the decision still makes sense. When you learn new information, the decision still aligns. The foundation is solid. Successful people have learned to build decisions that actually are right, not just decisions that feel right. And this requires understanding what structural elements make a decision strong. Here is the pattern. A strong decision has three elements. First, it is based on clear principles about what matters. Second, it accounts for the actual context you're operating in. Third, it is reversible or adjustable if new information emerges. Most people build decisions on none of these elements. They decide based on emotion or what sounds good or what other people are doing. Then they feel right about the decision because they have decided, not because the decision is actually sound. Let us look at each element, clear principles about what matters. This is the foundation. Before you can make a strong decision, you have to know what you are actually optimizing for. Are you optimizing for stability or growth? For independence or security, for speed or thoroughness, for impact or income? Most people never articulate this. They just decide based on what feels appealing in the moment, so they end up making decisions that actually work against what matters to them. A person who cares deeply about having time and flexibility takes a high-pressure job because the title sounds impressive. They decided without clarity about what they are optimizing for. The decision feels right at first, but then it becomes misaligned with what actually matters to them. A strong decision is built on explicit clarity about what you are optimizing for. If you know you are optimizing for flexibility, you can evaluate a job offer through that lens. Does this role offer flexibility? What is the culture around it? What would the schedule actually look like? Now you are building a decision on a clear principle instead of a vague feeling. The second element is accounting for actual context. This sounds obvious, but most people do not do it. They decide based on a generic version of the situation instead of the specific situation they are actually in. Someone gets offered a promotion, and they decide based on the generic logic of promotions. Promotions are good. More responsibility is good. More money is good. So accept. But they do not account for their actual context. Their company is going through massive change right now. The team they would manage is struggling. The role has turned over 3 times in 2 years. The actual context suggests this promotion might not be good for them right now, even though promotions are usually good. A strong decision accounts for the specific circumstances you are in, not just the generic category the decision falls into. It requires seeing the particular situation with clarity instead of filtering it through a template. The third element is reversibility. This is where many decisions go wrong. People make permanent commitments based on temporary understanding. They foreclose all other options based on information that might change. A strong decision either maintains optionality or makes peace with the constraints. If you are choosing between 2 paths and one forecloses other options, you need to be very certain before committing. If you are choosing something that you can easily adjust or reverse, you can move faster. Most people do not think about reversibility at all. They make a decision and hope it works out. But successful people are constantly asking, can I adjust this if needed? What would it actually cost to reverse this choice? Do I have enough clarity to foreclose my options? These 3 elements, clear principles, actual context, and reversibility, are what make a decision structurally sound. A decision with all 3 elements is strong. A decision missing any of these elements is weak. But here is the interesting part. A weak decision can feel very right. You can feel absolutely certain about a choice that is structurally weak. Because the feeling of certainty and the quality of the decision are not the same thing. Successful people have learned to separate these. They have learned to ask, is this decision structurally sound, regardless of how it feels? Does it rest on clear principles? Does it account for my actual context? Is it reversible, or am I comfortable with the commitment? Most people just ask, does this feel right? And they build their entire decision-making process around the feeling. This is why so many people end up making the same mistakes repeatedly. They feel confident about a decision, and then it does not work out. But instead of realizing the decision was structurally weak, they blame external circumstances. It looked good at the time, or I could not have known, or bad luck. But the truth is often simpler. The decision was structurally weak from the beginning. It just did not feel weak because the brain is very good at creating the feeling of certainty around decisions. Successful people have reversed this process. They do not trust their feelings as the primary signal that a decision is good. They check the structure, they ask the hard questions, they build decisions that are sound, and then they feel right about them because they actually are right. This is why their execution is so clean. Because they are not executing decisions that were emotionally satisfying but structurally weak. They are executing decisions that have genuine foundation. And decisions with foundation move without friction. In the next section, we look at how this understanding changes not just the decision itself, but your entire psychology around committing. There is a psychological shift that happens when you have made a strong decision. It is the shift from tentative commitment to fierce commitment. And this shift is where the real execution advantage emerges. Most people do not understand commitment. They think commitment is the decision itself. You decide and you are committed. But that is not how it actually works. Real commitment is something that builds gradually as you gain certainty about your choice. If you have decided quickly without full clarity, your commitment is tentative. Part of you is still wondering whether you chose right. Part of you is still holding back. You are moving forward, but you are not fully invested. You are hedging your bets. This half-commitment creates a specific kind of friction. When obstacles arise, you do not push through them with full force. You think, maybe this was not the right choice anyway. When feedback does not arrive as quickly as you hoped, you wonder if you should pivot. When the work gets harder than you anticipated, you question whether you should have chosen differently. This is not laziness or weakness. This is the natural result of making a decision without full clarity. Your mind is still holding space for the possibility that you chose wrong, so you cannot fully commit to making it right. But when you have built a decision slowly, when you have checked the structure, when you have accounted for your actual context and aligned it with clear principles, something shifts. Not just feel like you know, actually know, and this knowing creates a completely different psychology. With genuine knowing, your commitment becomes fierce. You are not hedging your bets anymore. You are not holding space for the possibility that you chose wrong. You have already worked through that territory. You have already questioned it. You have already built the decision on solid ground. So now you can invest fully. This is where the execution advantage lives, not in deciding faster, but in committing more completely. When you are executing a decision you have fully committed to, everything changes. You encounter an obstacle and you think, how do I solve this? Not, maybe I chose wrong. You get feedback that challenges your approach and you think, what can I learn here? Not, maybe I should have gone a different direction. You hit a difficult phase and you think, this is expected. How do I navigate it? Not, is this a sign I made a mistake? Full commitment transforms the entire psychology of execution. It turns problems into puzzles to solve instead of evidence that you chose poorly. It turns obstacles into information instead of regrets. Successful people have learned this. They understand that the slow work of building a strong decision actually creates the conditions for fierce commitment later. So they are willing to invest that time up front, not because they are more patient, but because they understand that this investment unlocks a completely different level of execution energy. Here is a concrete example. Two entrepreneurs both decide to start a company in the same space. The first one has an idea and launches quickly. The idea feels exciting. There is momentum. There is energy. But underneath, this decision was made fast. The founder did not deeply question whether this was actually the right market, whether they had the skills for it, whether the timing was right, whether they were optimizing for the right things. So when the company hits its first real obstacle, a competitor enters the market, a key hire does not work out, the runway is shorter than expected, the founder starts questioning. Maybe this was not the right move. Maybe I should have waited. Maybe I should pivot. The commitment is tentative, so the execution becomes hesitant. The second entrepreneur takes months to decide. She talks to potential customers. She researches the market. She honestly assesses whether she has the skills. She evaluates whether now is the right time or whether waiting would be smarter. She builds the decision slowly. Then when she decides to launch, something is different. She has full commitment. She has worked through the doubts. She has built the decision on solid ground. And when obstacles arise, she does not question whether she chose right. She questions how to navigate the obstacle. Her execution is fierce because her commitment is complete. This is why slow deciders often outrun fast deciders, not because they are smarter or work harder, but because they have unlocked a different level of commitment, and commitment is fuel. There is something else that happens too. When you have built a strong decision, you stop wasting energy on doubt. All that mental energy that would have gone into second-guessing and wondering whether you chose right can now go into execution. You are not operating with divided attention anymore. You are fully present to the work. This alone is a massive advantage. Most people are executing while simultaneously doubting whether they made the right choice. They are running the marathon while wondering if they should have chosen a different race. This splits their energy. But when you have committed fully, all your energy goes into the execution. You do not have to manage the doubt because you have already worked through it. You are fully invested in making this work because you have already decided that this is what matters. Successful people have built this into their entire approach. They know that the psychological shift from tentative to fierce commitment is where the real power emerges. So they structure their decision-making process to build toward this shift. They take the time up front so that they can commit fully downstream. And it is this full commitment that creates the execution velocity that looks like they are moving faster than everyone else. In the next section, we shift. We move from understanding why this works to learning how to actually implement it. Implementation starts with one question: which decisions deserve your slow time? This is the decision filter, and it is the most practical tool you can develop because it determines how you will allocate your most precious resource, the energy and attention you have for thinking deeply. If you slow down on every decision, you will never get anything done. If you slow down on the wrong decisions, you will waste time on things that do not matter and create friction on things that do. But if you learn to identify which decisions actually ripple, you can move with calibrated speed. You can move fast on small things and slow on big things. Here is the filter. Ask yourself 3 questions about any decision you are facing. First question: if I choose wrong here, what actually happens? Not in theory, in practice. What is the actual cost? Some decisions have low costs if you choose wrong. You pick a tool for a project and it turns out to be the wrong tool. You switch. You lose a day or 2 of work. That is the actual cost. Low cost means you can decide fast. Other decisions have high costs if you choose wrong. You hire the wrong person for a key role, and they damage your team culture, your project timeline, your confidence in your own judgment. You spend months recovering. That is the actual cost. High cost means you should slow down. Second question: how reversible is this decision? Can I undo it if I learn new information? Some decisions are easily reversible. You commit to a communication strategy and then realize it is not working. You change it. You try a new process and it does not fit. You abandon it. Reversible decisions do not require as much upfront clarity because you can adjust as you go. Other decisions are hard to reverse. You move to a new city and your entire life is reorganized around that. To reverse it requires unwinding relationships, finding new housing, disrupting your work. Not impossible, but costly. You choose a career direction, and it shapes what opportunities come next. You cannot easily go backward without some cost. Hard-to-reverse decisions require more upfront clarity because you will pay a price to undo them. Third question: how many other decisions does this one shape? Some decisions are isolated. You decide how to organize your filing system. It does not affect much else. If you change your mind later, it only impacts that one system. Other decisions are foundational. You decide what your core business model is, and that shapes what products you build, who you hire, how you market, what customers you attract. A decision about your positioning shapes what clients you work with, what competitors you consider yourself versus what you charge. Foundational decisions create cascading effects. Decisions that shape many downstream decisions require more upfront thinking because the ripples are wide. When you ask these 3 questions, you get a clear picture of whether a decision actually deserves your slow time. Low cost, easily reversible, isolated impact. Decide fast. You do not need to invest weeks here. Make your best call and move on. High cost, hard to reverse, shapes many downstream decisions. Slow down. This is where you invest your thinking time. The middle ground is where most decisions live. Moderate cost, somewhat reversible, shapes some downstream decisions. Here is where you calibrate. A moderate decision does not deserve the same time investment as a major decision, but it probably deserves more time than a trivial decision. Most people do not use this filter. They operate on a single speed, or they make decisions based on their anxiety level rather than what the decision actually requires. But successful people have internalized this filter so deeply that they apply it automatically. A CEO I worked with described it this way. She said she does not consciously think through the filter anymore. She just feels whether a decision is ripple or not. When she looks at a decision and it pings as ripple, high cost, hard to reverse, shapes other things, she automatically slows down. When it does not ping as ripple, she just decides. She does not waste energy on both. This kind of intuition comes from repeated practice, but you can develop it faster by actively using the filter for several weeks. After a while, you will start to sense which decisions matter without having to consciously ask the 3 questions. Here is a mistake most people make when they start using this filter. They confuse feels important with actually ripples. A conversation feels important, so they spend hours preparing. A meeting feels high stakes, so they worry about it extensively. But when you ask whether it actually ripples, whether the cost is high, whether it is reversible, whether it shapes downstream decisions, the answer is often no. It just felt important in the moment. Successful people do not trust their feeling of importance. They check the actual structure. They ask, does this really ripple or do I just feel anxious about it? Here is another mistake. They slow down too much on non-ripple decisions because they are perfectionistic. The filing system does not need to be perfect. The email does not need to be ideal. You can decide fast and adjust later if needed. Perfectionizing non-ripple decisions is where hours disappear. The filter protects you from both mistakes. It forces you to distinguish between what feels important and what actually matters. And it gives you permission to move fast on small things without guilt. Here is how you implement this. For the next week, when you face a decision, pause and ask the 3 questions before deciding. Do not trust your instinct yet. Actually work through the filter. What is the actual cost? How reversible is it? What downstream decisions does it shape? After a week, you will start to see the pattern. You will notice which decisions you have been slow on unnecessarily. You will notice which decisions you have been rushing that actually deserve more time. You will get calibrated. After a month, you will start to sense the ripple without having to ask all 3 questions. Your intuition will develop. But it develops faster if you start with the explicit filter. This is where implementation actually begins. Not with trying to slow down on everything or move fast on everything, but with developing the intelligence to know which is which. In the next section, we look at the actual process of deepening a decision, once you have identified that it deserves your slow time. Once you have identified that a decision deserves your slow time, the question becomes, what exactly do you do to deepen it? This is where most people get stuck. They know they should think more carefully about the decision, but they do not know what that actually means. So they end up spinning, they worry, they imagine scenarios, they loop through the same concerns, and they call this thinking deeply. But there is a specific process to deepening a decision, and it is very different from worrying about it. The deepening process has 4 phases. First, you articulate exactly what you are uncertain about, not vaguely, specifically. Second, you identify what information would resolve that uncertainty. Third, you go get that information. Fourth, you integrate what you learned and check whether your uncertainty has actually decreased. Most people skip straight to worrying. They do not do the work of articulating specifically what they do not know, so they end up spinning through vague concerns instead of investigating actual uncertainty. Let us walk through the process with a concrete example. Someone is considering whether to leave their job and start a business. Phase 1. Articulate the uncertainty. Do not say, "I am not sure if this is the right move." That is too vague. Get specific. I am uncertain whether I have the discipline to work alone without a team structure around me. I am uncertain whether the market I want to serve is actually large enough to build a business in. I am uncertain whether my family would be okay with the financial instability. I am uncertain whether I would miss the collaborative energy of working in an organization. Now you have specific uncertainties instead of a vague cloud of doubt. This is progress. Phase 2. What information would resolve each uncertainty? For the first one, discipline to work alone, what would actually prove or disprove this? You could work on a solo project for a month and see how you operate. You could talk to people who have made the same transition. You could run a small version of the business as a side project and see what emerges. For the market uncertainty, is it large enough? You could research the market size. You could interview potential customers. You could look at existing businesses in the space and see what they are doing. For the family concern, would they be okay? You could have direct conversations. You could model out what the financial situation would actually look like. You could talk to other families who have navigated this transition. For the collaboration concern, would you miss it? You could imagine what collaboration would actually look like if you start a business. Would you hire people? Would you work with partners? Would you build community around your work? Get specific about what collaboration you actually need. Phase 3. Go gather the information. This is the work. You do not gather it through imagination or worry. You gather it through investigation. You run the experiment. You have the conversations. You do the research. You look at actual data instead of guessing. A person considering this business transition might spend a month running a small version of it on the side. They might interview 20 potential customers. They might have deep conversations with their family. They might talk to 5 people who have made this transition and ask specific questions about how they handled the challenges. This is real information gathering, not imagining worst-case scenarios, not worrying about what might happen. Actual investigation. Phase 4. Integrate and check. After you have gathered information, you do not immediately decide. You let it settle. You notice what your intuition tells you now that you have real information. You check whether each piece of uncertainty has actually been resolved or whether new questions have emerged. Sometimes the information fully resolves your uncertainty. You gathered data about the market, and it turns out the opportunity is real and the timing is right. Your uncertainty about market viability goes from "I do not know" to "I am fairly confident this can work." Sometimes the information reveals that your uncertainty was misplaced. You thought you would struggle with discipline, but in the month you tested it, you discovered you actually thrive with autonomy. That uncertainty resolves in a different way than you expected. Sometimes the information surfaces new questions. You thought your family would be okay with the financial instability, but your conversations revealed they have more concerns than you realized. Now, you have a clearer picture of what they actually need from you to move forward. This is the deepening process, not imagining, not worrying, but systematically moving from vague uncertainty to specific understanding. Here is where most people go wrong. They stop too early. They gather one piece of information and assume they are done. They talk to one person who has made the transition and think they have enough data. They do a quick market search and think they understand the opportunity. Successful people do the work. They gather multiple pieces of information. They look at the opportunity from different angles. They talk to people with different perspectives. They do not stop until the picture is clear, but they also stop at the right point. They do not keep gathering information forever. They gather enough to move from uncertainty to clarity. Once they have that, they decide and move on. How do you know when you have gathered enough? This is the important question. The answer is you have gathered enough when your uncertainty has shifted, when you can articulate not just what you do not know, but what you have learned and what it means. If you started uncertain about whether you could discipline yourself to work alone, and after a month of testing, you have clear data about how you actually operate, that uncertainty is resolved. You might discover you love autonomy, or you discover you really need team collaboration. Either way, you are no longer uncertain. You have moved to knowing. This is the shift. This is when you can move to the next phase. The deepening process requires patience. It requires time, but it is time well spent because it moves you from vague worry to specific understanding, and specific understanding is what creates strong decisions. One more thing, during the deepening process, you will feel the temptation to decide. Your brain will get tired of the ambiguity. It will want closure. Resist this. The discomfort is part of the process. Keep investigating. Keep gathering information. Do not close the loop until you actually have clarity. Successful people have learned to recognize this moment, the moment when their brain is pushing them to decide before they are actually clear, and they have learned to push back gently. Not yet. I still need to know this one thing. And they keep going until genuine clarity emerges. In the next section, we look at what happens after you have built a strong decision. We look at how that clarity transforms your execution and creates the competitive advantage of moving faster than everyone else. This is where the entire advantage becomes visible. This is where slow deciding creates fast execution. You have done the work. You have identified that a decision ripples. You have articulated your specific uncertainties. You have gathered real information. You have integrated what you learned, and now you are at the moment of commitment. You decide, and something shifts. The shift is immediate. Your energy changes. Your focus changes. Your entire operating system shifts from evaluating whether to do this to figuring out how to make this work. This is not a small difference. This is the difference between hesitant movement and committed movement. When you are executing a decision you are fully committed to, your entire nervous system operates differently. You encounter an obstacle, and your brain does not go to, maybe this was a mistake. Your brain goes to, what is the solution? You get feedback that contradicts your expectations, and you do not spiral into doubt. You think, what can I learn from this? This is not positive thinking or willpower. This is what happens when your decision was actually built on solid ground. You have already worked through the doubts. You have already checked the structure. You have already gathered the information. So when you execute, you are not executing tentatively. You are executing with full commitment. Here is what this looks like in real time. A marketing director has spent weeks understanding the company's actual positioning, the market opportunity, and how to message it authentically. She has gathered information from customers, from the sales team, from market research. She has articulated her strategy clearly. She has built the decision slowly. Now she is implementing the campaign. A competitor launches something in adjacent space. Instead of panicking and wondering if her approach is wrong, she sees this as information. She asks, does this change anything about my strategy? Should I adjust my messaging? How do I differentiate given this new context? She is not questioning whether she chose right. She is questioning how to navigate the new landscape within her chosen direction. This is the mentality of committed execution. Compare this to someone who decided quickly without full clarity. When the competitor launches, they panic. They wonder if they should have gone a different direction. They consider pivoting. They second-guess their original choice. They waste energy managing doubt while trying to execute. The marketing director with the strong decision moves faster, not because she works harder or thinks faster, but because all her energy goes into execution instead of being split between execution and doubt. This advantage compounds over time. Let us say the campaign takes 3 months. The director with the strong decision executes cleanly. She hits some obstacles, but she navigates them within her chosen framework. She makes adjustments, but they are within the direction she has committed to. She reaches the end, and the campaign has delivered what she set out to achieve. The person with the hasty decision spends the first month executing hesitantly, the second month wondering if they should have chosen differently, and the third month either recovering from a change in direction or moving forward despite lingering doubt. They end up with results that are less clear because their execution was divided. But here is the deeper advantage. The director with the strong decision learns something real during the execution. She sees what worked and what did not. She gets market feedback. She sees how customers respond. And this learning compounds. She has not just executed well once. She has built knowledge she can apply to the next decision. The person with the hasty decision also learns something, but it is mixed with regret and doubt. They learn, maybe I should have chosen differently, along with what actually worked. So the learning is less clean. This is how slow deciding creates an accelerating competitive advantage. It is not just about this one decision. It is about how this decision positions you for better decision-making next time. Here is another concrete pattern. When you have made a strong decision and you are executing it with full commitment, you attract different kinds of energy and resources. People sense your clarity. They see that you are not wavering. So they commit to supporting you more fully. Team members give their best effort because they sense you are committed, not just trying something. Investors and stakeholders believe in your direction because you can articulate it clearly, backed by real thinking. The opposite happens when you are executing a hasty decision with tentative commitment. People sense your uncertainty. They do not fully commit. They hedge their own bets. So you get partial effort when you need full effort. This is not about charisma or confidence in the traditional sense. It is about the real difference between I think this might work and I know this is the right move. People feel the difference, and it shapes how they show up. Successful people understand this. They understand that the slow work of deciding well is not separate from execution. It is foundational to execution. A strong decision creates the conditions for clean, fast execution. A weak decision creates friction that no amount of hard work can overcome. Here is the practical reality. The decision phase and the execution phase are not separate. They are linked. How well you decided determines how well you can execute. How clearly you thought determines how fast you can move. This is why successful people invest in the decision phase. They are not procrastinating. They are not being overly cautious. They are being strategic. They understand that time invested in building a strong decision saves time in execution. Here is what you should expect when you shift to this approach. At first, it will feel slower. You will make a decision and want to move immediately, but you will pause instead. You will ask the hard questions. You will gather information. This will feel like you are moving backward. But then you will start executing, and something will be different. The execution will be clean. Decisions you made during the decision phase will prevent problems during execution. Clarity you built will enable speed you could not have achieved otherwise. You will move through obstacles without stopping to question your direction. After 3 months of this new approach, you will look back and realize you have not just moved faster, you have moved further. You have gotten to better outcomes. You have not wasted time on false starts and reversals. This is the compounding advantage of the slow decision approach. It does not feel faster at first, but over time, it is dramatically faster. Not because you work harder, but because you have removed the friction. Now we come to the final piece. We need to bring together everything we have learned and show you what this actually means for how you approach every decision from this point forward. You came here with a question. Why do successful people choose slowly and win faster? Now you have the answer. The paradox resolves because successful people have separated two things that most people confuse: the speed of deciding and the speed of winning. They understand that these are not the same thing. A fast decision does not create a fast victory. A strong decision does. This is not complicated, but it requires you to shift something fundamental about how you operate. Most of your life, you have been taught to move quickly. Speed is celebrated, decisiveness is rewarded, so you have learned to rush toward choices to resolve the discomfort of ambiguity. You make a fast decision and you feel relieved. You feel like you are moving. But what you have actually done is trade short-term anxiety relief for long-term execution friction. Successful people have learned a different trade. They tolerate the short-term discomfort of thinking deeply so they can execute with clarity later. They do not rush to resolve their anxiety. They use the anxiety as information. It is telling them that something matters, and when something matters, it deserves their slow time. But this slow time is not endless. It is calibrated. You have learned to distinguish ripple decisions from non-ripple decisions. You move fast on small choices because they do not merit the investment. You slow down on the choices that actually shape what comes next. This calibration is what creates your competitive advantage, not speed on everything, but speed on what matters and clarity on what matters most. When you commit to a decision that is built on solid ground, one you have thought through, investigated thoroughly, and aligned with your actual principles, something shifts. Your commitment becomes fierce, your execution becomes clean, your obstacles become puzzles to solve, instead of evidence that you chose wrong. You move through your work with full energy because you are not splitting your attention between execution and doubt. This is available to you now, not because you need to become someone different, but because you need to understand where the real game is played. The game is not in deciding faster. The game is in deciding better so you can execute faster. The advantage belongs to the person who has built the strongest foundation. Start with one decision. Identify something that ripples. Take the time. Ask the hard questions. Gather the real information. Build something strong. Then commit completely and execute with everything you have. You will be faster than you have ever been.